negative groups that were coming on many different levels. I have a couple of videos on YouTube where I also go more in detail about more of my conspiratorial side of my history, because I also had a military abduction back in the mid-90s upstate New York, where I go deeper into some of that shadowy world of harassment I had received from the NSA and other agencies. And so that's kind of a whole other section. I can go into some of that material as well if people are interested in that type of, topic coverage, because it all blends together in my life. In terms of spirituality, I developed a system I call cosmic shamanism, which is a blend of traditional workings in terms of working with the earth energy and the angels, more so from the Kabbalistic tradition. And I create more of a platform to connect more with the galactic realms, and to help individual people in client sessions I do with them to connect to past lives, to connect to their off-world lifetimes, or to give them certain constructs that they can work with to help augment their own connection to their own lineage, whether it's from earthly or off-world. Then we also do some other work, which is more like spiritual warrior kind of work, where we do some other more specialized type of activations to help counter some of the negative agendas that are going on. So that gets a little more hairy sometimes in terms of, us also remote viewing some of the underground facilities, undersea facilities, off-world bases, things that we're getting pulled in to want to, act as representatives, because there's so much stuff that's been going on from the darker side that is trying to hold back our evolution and our consciousness ascension process, that it's really important for us to really become more of the clear vessels for our I am presence to more fully anchor into the body, into the earth, and to choose to be a conduit for some of the galactic higher ascended beings and their groups to help work through us in our local communities so that we can kind of reclaim more of our sovereignty. And sovereignty has been a big theme also coming up in terms of not just the recent work, but working with some of the clients. I have a special niche of clients I work on that have also undergone, that have had different types of alien abductions, military abductions, MK Ultra, satanic ritual abuse done to them. So I work with some pretty intense areas, and can talk in more detail about some of those topics. Because ultimately it's about us bringing light to all those darker areas so we can understand that to choose the new reality and create the new paradigm, we have to be able to, illuminate and transmute the old. And there is a major, tug of war that's still going on right now in terms of polarity, in terms of a lot of the darker groups that want to manipulate our collective free will to be used against us to generate more negative timelines. So they've gotten very clever with different types of technology, augmentations, experimentations, to try to siphon energy off of people on more subtle, on massive scales and also more subtle scales. So it's important just to see where your attention and intention is being pulled, especially when you look at the mainstream media, which has always been a tool for, for a lot of the corporate control elite to really distract us and divide us. Understanding that the energies that are coming into the planet are all about unity and love, but it's also about refining our polarity. And so when you start noticing all the other aspects coming in, which are trying to do the opposite, it's an important indicator for us to see, well, where do you want to, what reality show do you want to tune into, right? And how can we change our subscription to any of these shadow reality stations, that are still requiring a lot of people to subscribe to them in order to empower their very existence, to continue in the new reality. So we have a lot more power than we realize, but so much of the mainstream conditioning has been about dividing us and having us bicker amongst each other, or over-identify, with the 31 genders that New York State recognizes, so that we even forgot what basic male-female is about. I mean, everybody has their own free will to choose whatever they want, but if you look at some of the rhetoric and like the narratives that are going on with the PC and the snowflake generation, stuff, or the extreme leftist liberal talk, which has been really distorted. There's a lot of things where they really are trying to, under the guise of giving us more rights, just creating more reasons to fight each other instead of loving and uniting each other. So it's just important to kind of look at things in that bigger perspective, because it is about the heart chakra. We do need to, come to a place where we're able to transcend, some of the differences that they try to use against us. Because first of all, even with the racial inequalities and things that are being pushed up, well, all these things are happening, all require a consciousness shift. Once we realize that we have reincarnation and that we have been most likely every other gender and every other nationality at different lifetimes, why would you even have some of those issues that are so seemingly hard for people to transcend at this current time? It's that veiling consciousness. So no matter what kind of laws they pass, or like people being angry and fighting against one group, that's not going to shift the narrative. All that does is create more. It's great to bring awareness if there's an issue, but if we have to pay attention, we have to pay attention so that we do not recycle or regenerate the very negativity that we're trying to expose and illuminate. right? Just like releasing ourselves from old trauma or old addictive behavior patterns. If it's fine to be able to talk about it and have therapy and release and heal, but if we keep, dumping it back into ourselves in a collective, then that narrative gets recycled, right? It gets picked up, not only by the media, but also on more subtle scales. Thought forms become like clouds on the astral plane, on the etheric level. So when the higher galactic beings are coming in and new energies are coming in from the sun and from different sources that are positive, if we're too busy, not able to raise our consciousness past those lower vibratory shells,
and we can't connect.
Exactly. Then we're disconnected from our center. We're disconnected from actually the root, because Mother Earth is evolving. In the middle of all of this craziness, she's evolving, and there's amazing energies coming out of the Earth's core. And I've talked in past circles before, past years, how some of the there have been many projects where the governments and the shadow governments, I should say, have tried to interfere with the energies coming out of Mother Earth's core. In a sense, that part of the shift coming up from Gaia's core, and not just in terms of the magnetic pole shifting, but there's new ascension codings that Mother Earth wants to share to us as her children. So it's very important during any meditation, especially anything that we do, to do extra grounding, where it's not just grounding your root chakra or roots, visualizing going into the earth, but really consecrate your whole corridor of connection all the way down to the core of the earth. Because it's like the umbilical cord from Mother Earth's heart, her womb, is evolving to give us new codings for the new DNA, to help us also assimilate love energies that are coming in from higher galactic realms that sometimes get caught or lost in the background static, especially when we're living in a dense city where there's so much electronic smog, that's both background as well as deliberate smog. We have so many things that we have to kind of transcend just to get out of that fencing of the matrix, that is around us, to be able to tune into what should be our natural birthright. So, that's why when the weather gets warm, I always do group meditations outside at the Obelisk in Central Park behind the Met Museum. I do new moon and full moon ceremonies there because it's a very powerful vortex and it's on a major ley line. And then I do group sun work and individual work on Riverside Park on 84th Street. There's a large mound there on Riverside Drive that has a lot of crystals, natural crystals content, and it's a beautiful vortex, and it kind of creates a battery pack for Upper West Side, Upper East Side. So it's a nice place to kind of check into even on yourself, just to kind of ground and really feel the higher ascension energies that the higher astral temples of New York City are getting more activated. And so it's important that we go outside, especially if you live here in New York and you want to just get out of the bustle, find some sacred points, which there are some nice little sites around where you can really connect and ask Gaia and Father Earth energy to really connect up through the nature kingdoms so that you can get your new update and at the very least feel more safe and more sovereign, in your own grounding. Because there's so many things, again, that are trying to keep us out of our safety root chakra area and adding more fear to it. So it's one thing when I talk about some of the negative agendas, it's not about trying to add the fear as I'm trying to disclose. It's more of a journalistic approach that we get, so we understand we have so much more power than we've been conditioned to believe. So that we have the ability to invoke some of these higher councils of light and love from different realms to come in and assist us, to be able to draw the line in the sand and be like, no, we do not give our power to continue this type of hegemonic control over our consciousness. Because that type of control has been so implicitly underwritten within some of our social contracts. We don't even realize it's there. And this kind of goes into a big sovereignty thing, which I started mentioning before. I started noticing a few of my clients that had a lot more of the intense attacks going on from the shadow government realms and technologies. One of the things that was showing up to help dismantle that, which may apply to some of you, but even as a general principle, I feel it's important to kind of discuss part of it. On one level, there's kind of like a reflection of a lot of the laws that we have in our 3D realm that are reflected in the astral plane, or they attempt to put it on the upper world realms to create like a kind of obedience system of almost like another aspect of the matrix that relies more on legal frameworks and social contracts that we have oftentimes not even realized we had signed those contracts of. And on a basic level, one example is like with the borders. For example, if you try to cross the border to Mexico or Canada, right, you have to have your passport. There's a lot of monitoring that goes on there. If you try to bring certain items across the border that you shouldn't, you may get confiscated or get in trouble. Now, that same law on a physical level that we all take as a mandate that we follow, right, without any question, they try to use our permission slip that we have on a grounded level as a kind of extrapolation to the higher realms. In other words, when certain people I work with were getting attacked, the frameworks that came in that we had to release was an extension of that idea. So in other words, they're saying that as a U.S. citizen, you do not have the right to explore, to cross the boundary of hyperspace, to cross the boundary into 4D. If you do, you'll be monitored, or you'll be controlled, and if you try to bring back any of the gifts from upper world, from the galactic levels, they will be taxed or levied or taken. And so that's a very, it's a very interesting idea. And sometimes we'll have things where people try to use psychic protection and it doesn't always work, and they're still getting harassed. Some of it has to do with these other underlying aspects of like our control system that, like I said, that is built into more of this spiritual like lawyer aspect that you have to be to really claim your own sovereignty. So like even in meditations when we're working with the people, we'll ask the angels and guides, and our galactic allies and Mother Earth to help us basically just make that declaration that you want to be a universal, sovereign love citizen, right? That is a representative of your respective homeworld. Think of like an embassy, that is protected in a different country and outside the laws of the local jurisdiction. We are each galactic emissaries. We have to claim that galactic liberation space, that from upper world to come through us, and then invoke Gaia, because Gaia wants to christen everybody who is in the heart chakra array to be able to carve out a new space within our own magic circle, within your own land, within your own community, that is also a sovereign, love-infused space. And so much of this work that's going on is about reminding us that we've given so much power away in very subtle ways that we're now being asked to reassess the very nature of, not just on a spiritual level, on all different levels, what we invite into our space, what we declare our space to be, and what do we not want to have in our space. We're co-creators, and we're given a chance to really identify more specifically, the elements we want, from each of the 4 directions, from above, from below. So we're we're kind of like the architects of this new kingdom, of this new age. And so part of that message is about, reclaiming some of your tools that have been used against us, and so some of these subtler scales, like as I mentioned, with like the Border Patrol analogy, another aspect of that came in when we were trying to ground or connect to these new codings coming out of the Earth that Mother Earth wants to give us. The background, like, matrix signal, if you would, was saying, oh no, you don't have the right to do that because you don't have the permits for the proper zoning to access like the treasures coming from the ground, like if you're mining gold or silver, for example. So even some of those basic laws of how you are required to get permits, to do something like that on a physical level, that is transferred over on the metaphysical level. So you have to reclaim your sovereign space to actually dig energetically into the earth and be like, no, Gaia wants to give us this beautiful new space to share her love, her codings through her umbilical cord to us. And you proclaim your space so that you ask the angels to expand the volume of your connective corridor so that it's not like squished in, or collapsed in. If you have like a wellspring and you have rocks collapsed in, you're not going to be able to get the water, or water gets contaminated. So on the energetic level, there's been a lot of and projections by these groups where they try to sabotage that gravitational cavity that is between us and Gaia's core. And the thing that people don't understand also is that it's not just about electromagnetic radiation that's being used to convey information. Every force in nature can be modulated as a carrier wave to convey information, both on the light side or the dark side. And some of the negative extraterrestrial realms, they have technologies that like to modulate some of these other forces of nature to manipulate your energy field or your DNA. And so it's even more important that as we honor our 4 directions, for example, in a basic shamanic manner, and realize that everything is getting upgraded. So as the 4 directions are invited, and the 4 elements are invited into your space, give them a chance to connect more, not just as a kind of cross, as it represents symbolically, but it's the sun, it's the love energy in the center of the 4 directions that we need to really invite so that cross becomes the cross of resurrection, not the cross of just the death of Christ, because as the church wants to keep people stuck on the cross, more of the martyrdom cycle of Pisces instead of the resurrection energy of Aquarius. So that's all about grounding the love energy, into the 4 elements so that they create a synergy. And that synergy creates a new foundation that attracts more of that love energy from Mother, Father Earth that you can connect to. And so anytime you start feeling yourself slipping away from that, it's always a good idea to check back in to find out where is your foundation, water, so to speak, being tainted, so that you can really reclaim your fuller sovereignty in each moment that you may have been giving it up without realizing it. So like even before going to sleep, it's very important to kind of ask the guides and angels to bless your dream plane and like your whole dream state to guide you, because there's so many activations that you can receive, initiations while you're sleeping, especially now with the new energies coming in. And it's not just to be a dumpster zone for your troubles or worries, each day when you go to sleep. Really start taking advantage of all the time you have to be used as a tutorial and as a karmic healing for you. That's all tied into that transparency between realms that's increasingly occurring right now. I'm sorry.
The obelisk in Central Park,
yeah.
A lot of people don't know that's Cleopatra's Needle.
But yeah, it was nothing to do with her, but it was called that though. Yeah. It was back during the time of, it was used as one of the original two pillars in the city of the sun in Heliopolis.
Right.
So it marked the entrance to Heliopolis, which is why it's a great solar, powerful, energy there. And also just to kind of make a little bridge from the sovereignty aspect. In addition to that, we've also been identifying other like negative extraterrestrial players that have been kind of hiding in the background, because the same thing happens like in the mainstream media where they always try to blame one person or one party for problems as opposed to looking at the bigger pictures, or even in conspiracy circles, everybody wants to blame the reptilians for all the world problems, but like not realizing there's so many other groups that have been inflicting a lot of drama on humanity for many millennia that have been kind of getting very little press. And for me as a double Gemini, I like to be a reporter to shake up their little cages, and be like, no, you a-holes need to be exposed so we can kick you out. And that's the same thing. That's like having a hidden abuser and you're not realizing that the abuser's been there, and the same way Illuminati or other groups, talk about them, that they try to only say that there's a smaller amount of families than there are actually in order to divert the attention. So it's always that turtle shell game that occurs, you find all around all scales, where they want to just keep people's direction, one way while they manipulate things in the other areas. Misdirection, exactly. And the psyops is rampant on all different scales. One of the players that we identified that's been basically last November I went to Paris and Prague, and when I went to Paris, I couldn't actually do any spiritual work over there. There was so much heavy energy, and the matrix field was so strong. My first time in Paris, and but since that point, from November to January, there was a lot of drama going on collectively with different ET groups that were trying to kind of almost like they were kind of showing up as almost like planetary ticks, where they start trying to ground themselves in certain locations to try to siphon more energy out of the ley lines of the planet, and then redirect people's energies towards those locations so that they could be woven into more of a negative timeline. So, and stuff like that, so I was freaking out a little bit because I was like, oh my God, what's going on now? This is like really dramatic, even for shit I've had to deal with, right? So we started doing a lot of circles for that, and doing teleconferences and calling a lot of angels in, and I was doing really busy in a dream plane, a higher self coming in and having a lot of battles, because a lot of us are much more powerful than we give ourselves credit for. Some of us are more healers, some of us are more warriors, some are magicians. We all embody different archetypes that we can really expand into the new octave of, to take on the roles that we need to be harbingers of this new age, and to not take any bullshit from these groups. It's very important that you're all New Yorkers, right? So the idea is, we don't want to take this crap from all these negative entities. And so many people in the New Age movement, overly focused. Love is important, but we need to have the willpower with the love. It's love in motion. It's discernment as well as love. And not to especially with the snowflake PC generation, truth sometimes hurts, but truth is important. Truth is more important than someone's emotional sensitivity to not want to hear the truth. Although I'm too sensitive, I can't know the truth, I can't focus on the darkness. It's like, well, it's too late, the darkness is already here. We have to get rid of it. So you have to pick yourself up, shine that powerful light of yours. Like, what kind of light worker are you if you can't hear any little bit of bad news, it's like, are you a disempowered light worker, so it's always good reminders that whenever we hear these things that are coming up, it's almost like a planetary soap opera. We have different ways to, or we can definitely switch theaters and not just keep repeating the same movie over and over again, or at least keep those characters off our stage. So one of the groups that was coming in is in the constellation Southern Cross, actually, and they're a humanoid group. There are a couple of humanoid groups that have been kind of a pain in our humanity's butt, so to speak. They're like 4D negative ascended groups, and they work a lot with the Orion group, with like the negative group from Orion. Now Orion has, I'm not trying to label constellations, I'm just saying that these are locations where some planets exist that have negative hierarchies on them, because most constellations have both light and dark within them. But to make it short in terms of describing like the galactic topography, we have to identify some marker points. So in Orion, there's
which I've talked about before, like some of the highest level, there's some of the highest level dark and light within the same constellation, which is one reason why it plays such a historical role in our societies. One of the guys from the Egyptian mythology named Set, you know, the one who killed Osiris, you know, he's a real galactic douchebag. On a real level, he's like a six-dimensional negative like overlord. He's like the Emperor from Star Wars, but much higher. And he's very annoying. I've had a lot of conflicts over many eons with him in different levels. And parts of my soul family that had some positions in Egypt as well. They were part of the bird tribes. Which he doesn't like, the positive bird tribes. So a lot of times we'll find these themes in mythology that are actually reflections of historical accounts that are happening in higher dimensions or multi-dimensions and across time. So it's not just relegated or delegated to some little papyrus, you know, or some like, oh, Egyptian belief in a temple, you know, that they were so out of touch. You know, they were actually documenting, you know, important characters that we just, anthropologists like to just put on the side as thinking that it's just in somebody's head or in the religion. But Set's group, I mean, there's modern day temples of Set. I mean, Set is one of the main gods that the Illuminati groups worship. I mean, aside from some of the Draco affiliations, there are temples of Set that they have in different locations. And there's also like public groups that call themselves the Temple of Set, you know, that have been around and have websites and stuff. And just some of the things that they put on their public websites for the Temple of Set, you know, you can really see how crazy these people are in terms of like how dark and evil. I mean, these are not, you know, it's not the borderline here of like, oh, we're like, you know, we're not like gothic kids who are playing on the dark side, you know? No, these are very, very potent individuals that put a lot of energy into control, manipulation, and creating chaos. And it's hard sometimes for like light workers who especially are very compassionate and loving to understand like the full nature and impact of duality and how it's impacted us now and still is, you know, and that's by design. The darker groups want to keep light workers and everybody else just up in the clouds thinking about the ascension and what's coming as opposed to dealing with the crap that's here still. And they want to divide upper world and underworld so that they can keep ruling middle world. But that's what we have to kind of be like, no, we're not taking that anymore. You know, we have to be able to create that reflection, a clearer alignment below us in underworld that truly reflects the beauty and majesticness of upper world. That way you have the reflection coming from below and above, and then you create a shift in between, which is middle world. You know, but if they try to contaminate and mess up all the quantum levels in the underworld symbolism, you know, then it creates a schism between the ground, our higher galactic selves, right, into these bodies. So a lot of the work is like a Hermetic kind of aspect that I also work with, you know, as above, so below, but it has to be refined. It's not to be just assumed that that's how it is always, because a lot of the negative groups try to manipulate those laws for their own benefit, you know, especially if people are just stuck in their normal thinking in middle world and aren't even connecting to their higher self or don't want to do with their shadow, then it's much easier for you to be co-opted by something else. It's like, okay, well, if you're not using that part of the room, then we're going to be squatting in there. You know? We're like taking up your energy without even knowing it because you're not even claiming that as the resource you want to use, so you're not missing it. You know, but that's the idea, is that we have to reclaim our awareness that there's so much more of our potency in our inner temple that we've neglected. You know, and being able to start that energy, you know, in the heart and then going outward is really important. So this group from Southern Cross, they're a Hermetic group. There's actually two concepts I want to explain a little bit first. There's one I always talk about this a lot in the past, but it's important for new people to hear it as well. It's called the star heart. The star heart is an evolution of the heart chakra. First time it showed up, it's kind of like Aaron's breastplate, or like a tic-tac-toe pattern with crystals on it. Or it can appear as a wheel with crystals around it on the heart chakra. And this is one of the upgrades in our Merkaba field and our light body that's happening, where each crystal represents a different connection to a different star system, a higher positive planetary group. And it represents our ability to increase our capacity to be filled with more love from other sections of the cosmos that the Creator has helped, that has set in motion long ago. Same way that we have. It's almost like a parallel, in a way, or analogous to the tree of life when you're working with the angels, that there's so much more love we can receive from the angels that have specialties and that relate to different planets in our solar system that's mirrored in our body in the tree of life. So this is kind of a similar idea, but on a grander scale. For example, it's like having a compartment, you know, inside your heart chakra where you can specifically receive love from the positive Pleiadian priestesses, or ones from the Arcturians, ones from Andromeda, well, etc. So these are ones of Sirius. So these are literally forming in a person's field, and Gaia, the Earth, is doing the same thing. There's core shifts going on in the planet where different locations are being shifted so that Mother Earth can plug into this higher galactic crystalline field of energy that is made of a composite of love shared between these worlds that have already ascended and that are in higher vibration. And so but the dark groups have their own opposite version of that. the negative worlds that the negative ETs come from, they have like their version of the dark web. It's what we kind of call the dark star heart, web. And this is a structure that they have kind of put over different planets that can be seen as kind of like the matrix, one aspect of the higher dimensional version of the matrix of control. And it can be very much like a dark web. One of the groups from Orion that works with Seth, he likes to work with these really nasty like spider energies, like dark spider clan. They kind of look like 10, 15 tall, like almost like
obsidian looking like dark spider energies. And there's like an arachnoid humanoid race too that's there, that's negative. And they're pretty creepy. So we've had to do a lot of work. We had to like go and dismantle with grid work some of these darker, sometimes they can appear as just like dark web lines that like crisscross into people's fields, or people have them sometimes like dreaming of dark spiders in a dream plane and little astral things that come around to try to siphon energy off people. Important that we have psychic spiritual hygiene to clean off our fields so that we're not, being seen as prey by some of these, by some of these predators, and really redefine our environment to make it less hospitable for those energies or entities to want to even come near us. So this group, so part of this dark web energy is that they kind of use it to harvest and share the bounty of consciousness and of negative emotions that they've gathered from different planets of people that they've controlled. And this is why it's important to understand that we're, on the negative side, these groups in the higher Illuminati families, because they're so, on the grounded level, since they're so rich, money for them is relevant. It's consciousness is the commodity that they are working with, and people need to understand that. It's like capitalism on crack, on the worst scale possible, and we start understanding that this methodology, of viewing people as, as a consciousness engine that they want to harvest, is something that's important, because it's pretty psychopathic and sociopathic, but this is how these groups view people. They view us as sheeple, but we're not. We need to claim our ability. Do you want to follow the herd, or do you want to, shoot the arrow towards the darkness and illuminate it, And so there are a lot of different technologies that are being created to kind of sift through people's fields to try to manipulate our quantity of light that our DNA is holding. So there are things that are being put into chemtrails, that are designed to, create more of like little micro antenna systems, nano antenna systems in our cells that can act as a relay for some of their other programs that are being sent to different locations, from underground bases, from advanced quantum computer systems that they have, where they're trying to basically, for them it's like, and you start looking at some of these documents that the Pentagon has put out, or different think tank studies, where information warfare is a major thing. Even during the Cold War, it was a huge thing. There are papers I found online that were, never really classified, but there's a great website that it's called dtic.mil, DTIC.mil. It's the Defense Technical Information Center, a website. It's basically the Pentagon's main website for all scientific research. There's like the unclassified section anybody can go to, and then there's a classified area. But some of the documents you find in papers on here are quite revealing, and there's a couple papers I found on information warfare in Russia and China that were written back in like 04, 07. But they list different types of technologies, that Russia and China have that they would never admit publicly even exist, and so they, including like psychotronics and like mind control technologies in a very specific way that they talk about, bioresonance systems and, influencing the population's, subconscious through all different types of technology. They actually start labeling it in these documents, which I thought was interesting, because for me, those are like smoking guns of things I experienced directly, and I know others have as well. And so, this idea of that, this narrative of information warfare, of seeing information and the mind, like the mental battlefield, has been going on for a long time. And it's just us that need to catch up to the idea that if we're being perceived like that, it's up to us to create the mental firewalls to protect, your own hardware, your own memory fields, so that you're not hacked by anything negative that is trying to potentially latch onto your field or like limit your access, to this higher galactic love net, that is forming, which can connect us more to your, higher allies from other planets. So a lot of the work we're doing is about creating these interface structures by working with different language, different symbols, different thought forms, different visualizations, so that we can build this kind of bridge between consciousness on humanity, and the positive galactic beings that we want to connect to. And it's extra important because the dark groups have done the same thing for so long on the other side. Sorry, is it move the camera? Sorry. Oh, it stopped. Okay. Oh, Steve, can you get the camera? Sorry, yeah. So the idea of this, fence on like the border patrol between countries. It's like that fence is an illusionary fence, but it's very real until we decide that we can walk through it, until we claim our right to be this right of access, especially with Mercury retrograde coming up now, later this week, now next week, the idea of us being able to, really be like Hermes and go between the worlds and not be touched, is kind of a great theme to unravel some of their, shenanigans that have been used against us. But as part of the new energies are coming in, both galactically to the Earth and from Mother Earth's Kundalini rising, it is shifting a lot in the weather systems. Aside from weather engineering that's going on, there's people I know, the friends, psychics that we work with, they're picking up on different changes happening at the poles. So there are a lot of changes that we kind of monitor carefully and send energy and ask the higher beings of galactic realms to help monitor, some of these idiots that are, still trying to go, claim the matrix, for a longer installment than we would want.
In their tactics to try to destabilize certain locations and energy fields to be able to co-opt more people and to buy more time for their existence. So we don't need that. But this understanding their motivation is important so we can intercept it and be like, no, we are not here as new creators, up, love, and above. So as part of that energy is coming in, part of the Mandela effect, of course, is about the timelines and that are converging, both on a parallel level, and that some of these timelines, are closer to our reality than other ones are, so it's interesting that it's a reflection also of our co-creative capacity, to be able to create new things that all of a sudden are instantly edited in our consensus reality. So like when part of the Mandela effect had first shown up, and people on the internet were talking about, small things, small effects, where like names of characters in movies, scenes from movies were changed. The famous one from Star Wars, where like Luke, I am your father, now he's like, no, I am your father. Like certain people remember elements of timelines where certain things that are presented in the media are very different than they are now. And it's part of that stitching or like crossing over. There are other examples that are kind of funny. We were doing a lot of work in England past couple of years, and other people that I know that were incarnated from like the Camelot time period. So there's a lot of type of work we're doing has to do with timeline healing, where we have the ability to, basically help transmute and discharge some of the negativity that's been incurred at different locations over time, because that's important to heal so that we can collectively move past that energy so it's not used against us. The same way that we need to heal ourselves, certainly early trauma that you might be having in your memories in your cells when you were a child, that's essential for you to move forward. On a collective humanity level and planetary level, it's the same idea. So we have the ability to really, be like walking, like acupuncture needles, on like Gaia's meridians to be able to transmute. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. I'll stay a little longer though. It's okay. There's no one here. Yeah, thank you. That's just 5 minutes, but part of that work ties into something that was that I mentioned in the description that we call the global tesseract shield. This I started coming in a couple years ago when I went down to Costa Rica. We're doing activations in the volcano there in Arenal near La Fortuna, basically there were a lot of stories involving this, and I went to England afterwards to activate the other point there. They're basically there's a hypercube. A tesseract is a hypercube, especially now with the Wrinkle in Time movie, which I haven't seen yet, but the old book she talks about like the tesseract in that book. The tesseract or the hypercube is a fourth dimensional cube. A fourth dimensional cube has 16 points compared to the normal cube that we have on 3D, which is 8 points. So these 16 points are showing up. They're showing up as these big pillars of light. The giant like watchtowers that are forming around the Earth. So it's if Earth is in the middle of this big hypercube, and it's kind of part of Gaia's one of her newer geometric like light suits that she's expanding into to be able to receive more love from other realms and being able to heal her own sense of her own relationship to time. Because in a hypercube, this is part of one of the geometries you can use to go through time on an astral or physical level, depending upon technology that's creating it. The hypercube itself, it's one of the basic. You could look online for like the moving little like gifs of a hypercube just to visualize it. One of the ways you kind of see it is like a cube within a cube, where the inside points connect to the outside points with these lines. But it's more complicated than that. But there'll be meditations we'll do where we'll visualize a hypercube in each chakra, and have the chakra be in the center of a hypercube. And basically it's creating a new space where we're upgrading our ability to be like living lanterns, for the heart of God, for the eye of God to shine through your body. So working with geometries in a more playful, magical, fun way, it's definitely appealing for my inner child. But definitely in the work we do, it's important that we engage, part of that magical child within us, so that, we're not too like grumpy or overly serious with the work, even if there's heavy stuff to clear. Part of dismantling their system is through joy and innocence and laughing at their over-the-top dramas that they try to do. Because it's like watching a bad movie sometimes with some of these characters and how attached they are to their darkness, but how instantly it can be transmuted if you light up the candle in the room and be able to illuminate that space. And so these 16 points. So there's one we're active in Costa Rica, one in England, in a place called Stipperstones. It's in Shropshire. There's a natural outgrowth of quartzite rocks there that are amazing. So these different points that are powerful, like harbor points, for some of the higher dimensional light ships that are coming in from other star systems, because they're like new docking harbors, where they want to come in. And so there's been some fighting going on around these points. There were some negative groups that were also, as I started mentioning, from Southern Cross, and also from Sirius B. Sirius has light and dark groups there, and there's another humanoid group in Sirius B that is very similar to the Anunnaki, lower Anunnaki vibration, but they're kind of like the Roman Empire, like negatively ascended, mixed with the CIA, and they kind of look like the Romulans from Star Trek, if you want to get like a little bit of description of that, and so they're like the military like strategist think tank on the dark side, so they like to keep a lot of stuff secret. And from a former insider that I knew who was in the Illuminati, he had told me that some of the bloodlines of some of the families are directly connected to the negative Sirius group. And so it's not just this whole Draco thing, it's also other humanoid negative ET groups that have inseminated and intervened, with various bloodlines to try to expand their hegemony, into other systems, and to spawn type of individuals that would work with them. And so there were a couple underground bases for the Sirius group that we were identifying and trying to send energy out to counter. One of them is off the coast of New Zealand, one's off of Japan, one's here in the Caribbean. And that one in the Caribbean is actually a combination project with part of the Navy secret space program, where they were doing some more advanced mind control projects and hybrid work. They also like to work with other things like, I'll go into it. But part of the idea of like the dark web I started mentioning before is that part of the energy that they want to extract, this is connected to the idea of like the black goo, which maybe some of you have heard about before. Some people refer to it more as connected to the AI. But there is this kind of dark, kind of energetic substance, like very oily, tar-like, that can appear on different scales. And it's kind of like the blood of the beast. It's part of what the energy of the satanic groups and the ones who do ritual abuse and sacrifice, they kind of harness this energy, and it becomes like a kind of base fuel, where they use it as a kind of a, same way that you'd store electricity in a capacitor or battery, these people store dark chi energy or this constructs. And on the galactic level, it can be seen as like a dark web network, literally, where the web is like veins, where this energy is like relayed back and forth. And they'll try to like put these nets over societies to like keep them locked into negative emotions and fighting and dramas, or in order to harvest that kind of conflict energy, the essence of it. And this group from Southern Cross, they've sometimes I work on clients who've had very interesting past lives, so I get to access some of these. I get to like psychically hack into some of the collectives, that would be harder to get into. So like I'd worked on one person, and she had a Dark Queen lifetime in the Southern Cross planet, which is the first major entrance I had into getting into that collective. And she's a light being, but she had a dark lifetime, very high level. So I've had several clients like that. Thank you, dear. I'll go a little bit longer. Sometimes we get this like higher level like intel, so we can be able to work with it, because it's understanding that we also don't want to become overly self-righteous about the conflict that's going on with duality in a higher level, but understand that, there is this bigger ability to understand the importance of why polarity has been created and how we can do our role to heal and bring more unity to those deeper levels of darkness. And such, then we become like the master alchemists, and being able to create a solution that is able to have so much immunity against the negativity, because we were able to go into that part of the abyss, courageous and loving and whole. Know that we are love, we are united, and that we can't be divided. So anytime you felt that division coming in and you find that solution, you become like this crystal diamond tip of Excalibur, like you're like the living light sword of your higher self. So you can really beam that energy into those realms and be like, no, we can stand in the face of the deepest separation and still emanate unity. And it can still cut them, because it's not just about love, it's the sword is important too. You're cutting through the illusion, you're cutting through the doubts, with that sort of truth, that solar energy. So there are different archetypes that come in, because a lot of these higher beings on the light and dark side, work with different thought forms, because they're all very psychic and have a lot more power at the disposal with their DNA and with their ascended forms. So a lot of these higher, battles that go on in the higher dimensions are fought on a psychic level, not just with literal weaponry, because their psychic energy takes literal form, and so, but the more that they can get local populations to buy into their propaganda, of course, the easier it is for them to try to co-opt the population and get people distracted, and give away the power in different ways. So that group, the Sirius B, the group from Southern Cross, and one of the things we had seen was that, because I also worked on somebody else that this person was connected to, who had a lifetime in Southern Cross as like a cyborg, like super soldier on a 4D level, and they were using some of this black goo energy as a kind of like almost like the way that you have like a steroid, type of super soldier drug to strengthen their physiology. They have their own type of system on 4D as well, and so they would use that as a kind of like as a drug enhancement for their soldiers. And those are interesting details. It's not that you need to necessarily know them, but some of you may like to know some stuff like that, because it gives us, it's like the real Star Wars that's going on, for us to understand the higher level. It's important, because I also had other clients that were being interfered with by that group, and we had to do work with sending a lot of energy to Australia and other countries that had major grid systems that were created by this negative group from Southern Cross. They also work with two other groups, the Southern Cross, that we were identifying. One looks like kind of like the Grim Reaper, but we call them like what they call like the Shadow Reapers, and they have that, but they're more like black hoods, and they have like a black cape on and stuff. And you'll find sometimes that a lot of these groups will have connections to mythologies, because part of their methodology of inserting themselves into a local population is needing to work with what's available, or trying to install a certain philosophy or spiritual, religious influence, a certain school of thought that they could then co-opt later on, or use as a backer. Because we've given them that permission slip through either believing that religion or that methodology. So that's why it's even important for us to really look at our belief systems on a deeper level, so that we're not, just falling prey to other people's doctrines of sin and guilt and control, that have lessened our ability to really line up with our God self presence. But that particular Shadow Reaper group, they work with like a negative energy of like Sobek, like the Egyptian god Sobek, who's a crocodile god. They work with a shadow aspect of that. And the negative Syrian B group, they work with the dark side of Anubis, the shadow side of Anubis energy. And it's interesting because Anubis in the mythology, he had Nephthys as his mother, but he had Set in one storyline as his father, or Osiris. So it was like two timelines of variations. And I didn't really understand that until we started encountering the Syrian B group and seeing that some of their shape-shifting designs was that they were working with the werewolf archetype and with some of the werewolf energies historically, shapeshifters, skinwalkers. So there's a lot of things you kind of start to piece together history where these so-called storylines will actually have a higher resonance or higher origin point, or reflection. And this. And also it's interesting because in Sirius A you have part of the positive group, which is more connected with an Egyptian mythology with Isis energy. Isis energy is connected with Venus, with Sirius, and with the Pleiades. So there's a lot of beautiful higher civilizations that have inseminated some of these positive traditions that are good to reinforce. And we understand that those are the reasons why some of those names are being targeted, because they have such powerful support potential to help us get out of these dramas. So, as we know, the past few years, the name ISIS hasn't been the most nicest connotation associated with it, and that was partly being designed by the set groups within the military industrial complex Illuminati, who were trying to create negative thought forms around starseed, especially starseed women that were incarnated from the Pleiades. They were trying to create like an energetic cap so that women were not able to ground from that lineage the fullest potential of their divine goddess energy that wants to come in from the Pleiades. So there were some advanced psyop aspects to these groups where they wanted to contaminate one of the purest names of the goddess, Isis, with the darkest male energy that really is like Set, and attribute it to this group that the US and Saudi Arabia were creating, to fuel dramas in the Middle East, So there's so many levels to it. I had a friend who was in psyops briefly, and he had told me years ago when ISIS first came out, and he was there in Qatar, because Qatar is just a big, US military base, and we're funneling all these weapons, through Saudi Arabia,
At the photographs of the so-called ISIS people, they're wearing shoes that are U.S. military made, and the missiles that Saudi Arabia bought, a couple thousand anti-tank missiles a few years before, were all being funneled through Saudi Arabia and being used by the ISIS group. So he's like, this is such bullshit. He goes, half the people don't know what's going on, but the other half do. And it's this it's a big psyop campaign even amongst themselves. So there's many levels to that. And then I met another guy who was ex-military, like 11 years, and I was talking to him about I just met him, and he starts talking to me how he was being harassed by Set and another group that was connected to the negative serpent deity, Apophis, and that when he was in Iraq in 04, during the first big, or 3 or 4, during the first big war zone area, that him and the Marines saw these 20-foot tall shadow beings that appeared on the battlefield that were phasing in and out, and they're like, what the hell is going on here? Like, we weren't told there's something else happening. And a few times they saw these tall shadow beings walking these shadow hounds in packs across the desert, then they would like disappear. And he was like in the medical office in the beginning
of the first battles. And he said that in the morgue there, literally bodies were flying across the room or moving around by themselves, and like massive poltergeist activity with the electronics in the office. So he started doing more research, and he started coming to similar conclusions that I did from my own higher connections. He was finding out from his military connections and esoteric connections about this temple of Set and this war going on of people, and the Hollywood Illuminati that were, either towards the Set direction or towards Horus. And that there's this big in-house fighting that's still going on between these groups about who to pay legions towards. So, I did like one session with him, and he said he was still getting attacked by them, and he ended up having a past life from the Pleiades, where he was fighting, a Pleiadian army was fighting against Set's homeworld in Orion. He died there on that 4D level. Part of his soul pieces which needed to be pulled back that were still trapped from that trauma point. I'm almost finished, Mark. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'll talk for a few more minutes. That's good. And yeah, it's always opposite. It's hard for me to shut up instead of talking more. But it's fascinating because you start to piece together the storylines, like these narratives start to evolve over years, and you need people synchronistically or not synchronistically, that are part of the larger plan for you to understand. The nature of reality is so much more wild and so much more engaging, than most of us have been taught to believe. Yeah, maybe I'll stop at that point and go on to what I need to ask before about the Nibiru. Oh yeah, Nibiru. Honestly, Nibiru to me is totally like, well, in terms of what the mainstream would talk, or for me it's more of a psyops campaign. There definitely is like the planet that was Maldek, that had blown up, that was between Mars and Jupiter, and it had a moon too that was connected with that name. And there are definitely, were Anunnaki, but other than Anunnaki, I've worked with a few Anunnaki that are reincarnated in human form, that turn back to the light, so to speak. But there's definitely interesting things you can learn from connecting with these collective consciousnesses and people. But there's also a lot of propaganda. They were some of the original like psyops people back in Sumeria. Like they wanted to set themselves up as like the gods who made humanity, which is bullshit. They were involved in some genetic projects, but they definitely were not the reason we were made. We were not made to be a slave race. That's the ultimate propaganda to try to create a narrative which automatically suppresses us below our higher potential. Makes us seem a victimized martyrdom society instead of a divine human society that was made of God's energy and positive beings as well. Sure, there was negative influences, but we can't let that narrative overly define our history, because if they control our history, they manipulate our future more easily. It's the traditional psyops, but applied, ancient days, right, with the mythology and religion. So similar ideas, they want to keep people under more fear, disaster, survival, just when new energies are coming in, like even with this small thing and media-wise, that was a big deal, the one in Florida with the school shooting. Day before the massive eclipse, boom, anything to divert people towards like social issues or different issues that we can be harnessing the energy to create a whole new society, and they want to keep people, totally locked in fear, totally in a discourse, that's almost irrelevant pictures of what we should be addressing in terms of alien disclosure, getting out technologies that we've been keeping secret from society, for so long. This is definitely part of what's coming up, and there's a lot of in-house fighting going on in our governments, to let this other technology out and to go after some of these other, cabal groups, so to speak, or Illuminati groups that have infiltrated so much of our infrastructure. So, the next couple years is going to be very interesting to see what happens, just in terms of the grounded level of it. But you can't really believe a lot of what the media is saying about, because a lot of that media is being controlled. So, and they're distorting a lot of the storylines, what we're hearing. So it's not just a black and white game, about anybody right now in terms of on the political level. Even though there are a lot of stupid things going on with our president, there are also other things that are going on behind the scenes. And I always point to these 2 executive orders that Trump made that are cool, which don't get any press at all for some reason. Even though he does so many stupid things that get overpressed. But it's important to understand there's a bigger picture, even on the ground level. Like he did 2 executive orders. One that he did when he first got president, that was about going after transnational criminal organizations that are involved in human trafficking and child pedophile rings. That's a very good executive order to me about trying to organize that, which in transnational criminal organizations, that's a pretty broad term that can go after a lot of these Illuminati-like structures or their extension of
Autocracies and their gangs. The second law he made, which is more interesting,
and also interesting, can go either way. But this is a more recent one he made, I think about 2 months ago, where it has to do with going after individuals internationally, including current government officials or past government officials that were involved in serious human rights abuses and corruption, which is really interesting. And that basically the
executive order that was made like within the past 2 months. I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting. But nobody's talking about it publicly or in the media. I'm like, okay, they're setting up a stage for something quite interesting, And then other people talking about those thousands of sealed indictments that the Justice Department have been creating since November, like many, many more than ever before. But we don't know who these indictments are for. So there's talk from people that are inside that has to do with the bigger mass arrests that are coming up to go after some of the deeper negative groups that have been infiltrated into our system. So it's going to be interesting to see how some of those things kind of unfold or what they're used for, So you can be entertained by part of the trickster aspect of what's happening in our politics, but and definitely claim your space, but don't get overly freaked out, or put so much of your heart into it that it takes away your own center, because again, ultimately a lot of these things are here trying to distract us from what's important in terms of our real grounding connections, to what's happening beyond the local storyline. This is all local temporary dramas, that are trying to opaque or obscure the bigger assimilation of our own divinity that wants to come through. So it's important that we kind of stabilize that first and foremost, and then, ask for guidance of how we can be of service to help further, create a clear path to our most maximum timeline that is benevolent for all of us, So I think I'll probably end it there since we're over anyway. Yeah, really good. Oh, the bird tribes. Love the bird tribes. Yeah. Sorry. What? You serious? Oh my God, I missed that. Oh my God. Oh, also one last thing. I am doing a group meditation for the spring equinox on Tuesday, a smaller group. When the weather gets warm, I'm back at the old place, but you can find me on Facebook or, if you on Facebook, or you can I have some cards I can give to if you want.